This is the Pure Signal podcast brought to you live, not live for you, but live for us here in Dallas, Texas at the Cradera Global Headquarters. My name is Ryan Medellin. I'm a manager in our marketing solutions practice, and I am joined by my best friends in the whole wide world, my co-hosts, my partners in crime, our North America CEO, Kevin Erickson, and our Global Chief Innovation Officer, Jake Carter. Despite the best friend moniker, still waiting for an invite to the family dinner. Maybe out on the lake one weekend, open and available for you gentlemen.
The lake is me, for some family dinner, but maybe we can combine them. So
that was the goal. We can do patio I made sure dinner. To include both of y'all in that statement as options.
Well, you have to start wearing a hoodie first. If you start there, then maybe we'll see if you can graduate to.
You know, I was no joke this morning thinking about the fact that we needed Pure Signal hoodies.
Oh, absolutely. We're marketing. Get on that.
Right.
That's an absolute. We need that.
Yeah, we saw those guys at CES that had the letter jackets for their podcast.
I don't know if I'm ready for a letter jacket, but I can do a hoodie.
You can do a hoodie. Yeah, we could have those little like black cards like Deloitte had, where they were going around like doing curated experiences. Get the full rig.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't think so.
The harness.
I'm not certain that's us.
Okay.
But hoodies. Pure Signal hoodies could be us. Not
I
Signal
almost threw it on
today. Pure Signal.
You almost
hoodies.
did.
I almost did, but then I was like, well, we're recording this on a Tuesday,
right?
And that still falls within I think Monday through Wednesday is you got a collar button up on a Monday through Wednesday. Thursday, you can start going maybe no collar. Friday, caution to the wind hoodie. Speaking of CES, we brought it up about the letter jackets that we may or may not be wearing next time you see us when we record this podcast.
I'm going may not.
we will not be wearing.
If you want to rock the letter jacket, you can absolutely do that. If you want, because of your own affiliations, you could have Pure Signal on one, and you could do stars on the other.
There you go.
So you could have both.
Yeah. And, I would love to walk into Dennis's office and have that conversation of we need $700 in the budget for letter jackets.
No, that's what you just don't ask.
Yeah, that's what
ask for forgiveness.
That's marketing. Like you find that in the couch cushion. In fact, we have a couch right here. We should be able to find that money right there.
Yeah, we have an empty chair that is not going to use. Maybe we could throw that up on Facebook Marketplace and see what we can turn that into some jackets. But yeah, speaking of CES, one of the things that we wanted to do as we prepped for this episode today and started talking about what we have coming up in the next couple of months, which is a lot of conferences, a lot of opportunities to meet and greet and to be a part of bigger things in the ecosystem. And we really thought it'd be a good idea to spend some time talking about that, how to approach conference season. I think it's something that, in my role in middle management, been given the opportunity. We got AW reinvent for the podcast. We were at CES. That was my kind of first introduction into being a part of these big conferences. And all I can think of the whole time I'm there is not only logistically from planning the conference, who's doing that, but from a company perspective, how do you go about that? And so that's kind of what drove the topic today. Of course, we have Adobe Summit coming up, which is a big one on our radar, but there's a lot of other ones going on too. So we wanted to just park on that and just talk through, first off, the landscape, because I think there's been a lot of change over the last couple of years of what the conference landscape looks like and kind of the designated areas these conferences play in, whether they're your broad enterprise infrastructure-wide conferences or they're your more tactical, like developer, sit in rooms and get hands-on keyboard type conferences. So I would love to open it up for opening thoughts. So we'll start with you, Jake, being Chief Innovation Officer. This is something, when you go to conferences, I'm sure you get a lot of opportunities to see what everybody's doing, what is everybody talking about, and kind of figure out where your brain needs to go to digest those types of things. But would love to start with you.
No, great. It's a fun topic. So let's start with, what does the segmentation look like? What is the conference landscape? My quick and dirty simple segmentation, that I've been formulating over the last 10 seconds as you were talking, is you have what I would call the consumer shows. So think your CESs of the world, your Mobile Web Congress, those type, that are generally oriented towards what's the newest tech that's coming out. Some vaporware, some not vaporware. Then you have, let's say, your industry oriented shows, which are exactly what they sound like, your HIMSS of the world, and the shows that are oriented towards a specific sector. Then you have, let's say, your platform conferences. Think, very classically the big players. So this is the Apple's WWDC, Google Next, Google I/O. Microsoft has theirs, NVIDIA had theirs a couple of weeks ago, all of that series. And then you have, I would call it more of the, let's say the analyst type shows, or maybe the peer-based learning shows. So think, Gartner puts on their symposium every year. Forrester has their symposium. and on and on and on. The Wall Street Journal has one. That's roughly the segmentation that comes to mind for me. I don't know, Kevin, would you add anything to that?
There's also companies, like we know Slalom and some of the other, some of our competitors will actually do, it's maybe not a conference for general public, but they'll do a lot of a similar look and feel like a conference where they'll have a lot of learning and they'll bring clients in and elements of that. No, I think that's I think it's a really good, good segmentation. And maybe one more that I'd come back into it is like there is really pay to play type stuff. So for lack of a better term, I'm thinking the Tony Robbins day, or, you've got you've got kind of hey, I'm coming for a particular inspirational type element training again that, both an individual might do, and it could be on an entrepreneurial topic. It could be on a general leadership topic or a company might send people
right.
that, it's a little different than the conference, but similar intent.
Yeah. And then I guess, this gets a little blurry. I don't know why this sparked that thought, but the ones that are oriented around networking, which I could argue that's part of the symposiums. That's a little bit of the consumer shows, but I'm thinking like the South by Southwest type events. I don't know why your Tony Robbins remind me of that. Yeah, can.
There's different elements of that may fit in the industry segment. But it speaks to the question, like right now, as an individual or as a company, as a vendor, how do you think about where you should go and how do you play? It's actually very complex.
But just in general, the fact that a lot of these conferences, there is overlap. That's something that we see pretty commonly these days, just because there are so many that in your hubs like Las Vegas, where a lot of these conferences like to be held, you will see overlap in not necessarily exactly similar industry, but very close, or, if not the same.
Yeah, it's funny because you actually warned us that we were going to talk about this today. And so I shockingly,
I warn y'all every week what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, there's two sides of that. There's the you warning us, and there's the us actually listening when you warn us.
Adhering to the warning.
Right, adhering to the warning. Shockingly, I actually adhered to the warning this time. So I did a little bit of research last night, to your point, just to see, look, if I scan the conferences that are coming up, what are the stated topics this time around? Kind of to the question of how much similarity is there, how much difference? And obviously I will acknowledge what I'm about to say. There's all sorts of sample bias here, because clearly the topics that I saw are based on the conferences that I looked at. But I did come up with my list of hey, here's the top 5 things that it looks like are going to be discussed this time, if you want to go into that.
I do. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But I did want to ask you both, and I'm asking this question based on level and not by age. Let me make that very clear. Because
I'm offended. As the old guy,
you can't be offended because I clarified it. I clarified it on level, right?
Where's the 30s and the 40s and the 50s in this room?
I'm looking at
what is the question?
I'm looking at 2 guys that have worked their way up the ladder and are now North America CEO and Global Chief Innovation Officer. Not again by age here, but my question for y'all is:
I'd lose that battle if you do it by age.
Over time, how have you all seen the conference landscape change? Jake, you went through the various sectors of conferences. There's obviously more now than there's ever been, but just, if you can kind of look back a little bit, maybe even we can start pre-COVID into, after post-COVID, just in general, how have you seen the strategy of these conferences, not from if we're looking at our strategy, but from companies that are holding these conferences change?
One of the histories of our company is we supported an event planning company that is probably really the world's leading, at least North America leading company that puts it on. It's a question of who's sharks and minnows, after interesting of why, what's the purpose of an event? How much of that is to actually sell whatever you're trying to sell. If we use a platform play, I'm trying to sell a platform. How much of it is, clients are using it as an opportunity to connect. You have all these different partner ecosystem companies that are trying to connect. So I think that what I would have said before, that in many ways these events were learning events. I think that's probably how they started. Think about it again, we're seeing with NVIDIA, we talked about this in the podcast last year, where they had their first kind of general user context, and everything from what the content was to the size to how unprepared, at least if I channel our former co-hosts' opinions who were both there, of what that experience was like. But I think that so that's where, for me, begs the question a little bit of okay, I've got a learning event that occurs, maybe from an individual, hey, how do I do something better? And there's all kinds of educational track on that. There is a vendor ecosystem. I want to kind of go walk the hall, so to speak, which I think is much more interesting at CES consumer show perspective than it potentially is in, the 1,000 firms. And even for us is, trying, should we invest in that to be on the floor, so to speak. There's a speaker event, Jake, you spoke last year at Summit. And then you have, obviously for us, what I think, and then go get more into the ROI of this, like the opportunity to connect with our clients, to connect, to have real experiences. Some of that can be curated through the learning opportunities that are at the event. Some of it's just simply, it's an easy place to get together. For us, our, not only in North America, but also globally, it's a great place for us. We have executives that fly in, and it's a chance for us to do business. And we talked about that a little bit for CES. I mean, we were doing quite a bit of planning for the year. So there's a lot. And then the last thing I'll just kind of come back and say, I view this for any training type environment. It's an opportunity for us to invest in our employees. Sometimes that is pure skill development, pure whatever. Sometimes it's a thank you. We had a team at reInvent that was there primarily using a lot of the technologies, but for the most part, they were there as a thank you for the hard and amazing work that they did to serve their client. And they had a chance to spend time with their client and together in that learning environment. So I think so. Again, what you started out probably as, really user conferences, I think, especially in the tech space, right? It was really, I'd go here so I could learn, to now all that information is available really at your fingertips. So now it's for different reasons. So I actually think the ROI of why these events occur is rapidly changing. And even the way that they potentially use these to, if you go to more of a platform player, are they using this as a way to introduce new functionality? Is that even work anymore? I mean, again, these are some questions that I would say, can you afford to do it once a year? I mean, right? There's a lot of different questions. So I think it's evolving, and for each of the companies, and I know we'll get into this a little bit, is like, why would you invest here? How do you actually measure the return on the investment across those different considerations?
Well, and that doesn't even get into at some point, there's a question of, can you afford not to? Which we can come to.
That. Yeah,
it's so listening to you, Kevin, it's really interesting. I had my own answer to this question, and I actually think yours is probably more accurate. I'm going to share mine just because I'm curious to know what you think. But my answer was, I actually went to the same place you said. I feel like a lot of these, they started with the users. So they started as user conferences. I'll pick on Apple. WWDC started as a way to bring in the developers who were building on the Apple ecosystem and to learn how to do it. As, let's say, vendors saw that that's where the users were at, these turned into, okay, well, this isn't just for the users. This is a place to go to make business happen. The users are there, so I'm going to be there. We're going to meet. We're going to make business. Then you get to, in my terms, like the oversaturation of, you get too heavy on the vendor side, and it becomes basically, you know what? These are really just marketing plays. These are a chance to get the platform for a moment and do your thing. What I had not considered, which I like where you were going, is, yeah, that's probably true to agree. There's probably also an element of, as you said, like, this isn't the only way to get the learning now. I mean, a lot of the reason that you would bring users together in this type of format has changed a little bit. So maybe there's a little bit of both.
Yeah. What I'm hearing, though, from everything that you just gave, is that regardless of what the reason is, there is value in each one of those reasons, whether it's a marketing play, a user play, a doing business play, whatever angle you approach these conferences at, you can find the value. You just have to know what you're looking for in order to shape up your plan that way. Because I feel like, too, like when I think about, in my pre-consulting life, the connection element, right? Before COVID, I think it was a lot easier to hop on a plane and go see somebody in person and be around your clients a lot more than we are today. And granted, we make every effort today to be around them as much as possible, but sometimes these conferences are the opportunity. You'll get to see some clients or, potential clients that you've been talking to in person rather than on a Teams or a Zoom call post-COVID, right? Where that's kind of become the new norm before you actually hop on a plane and go see them. So for me, that's where I've seen the big differences. There's a lot of other factors at play, but the driving force is like, let's get connection going again.
One thing that's interesting I've got stuck on your statement of like that we think there's value from these. I think I'm not certain there's value the way traditionally you would approach these conferences. I think there is value. Absolutely. You can work through it. Now I'm channeling my day job of really even like my stewardship job. So, I feel like accountable to the returns and the investments and I think there's difference in different companies or differently, even some of the, the way that Credera and the different pieces that we play or Omnicom in that sense, like there's different elements of like what you view. There's probably a lot of companies out there that use these big events as opportunities for them to really, confirm their order book for the year. And that makes a lot of sense for them. But then, the question that I've asked our teams on is, was it that event and our investment in that and being there that led to that renewal of that order book or new order book, or could you have done that in a more cheaper way? And that's the one question that I think I'm asking our teams. And so I think it's around, and I have a bias, and I would admit that I have a bias that it's not likely to be, valuable. But I do think being present in different ways, like, again, I'll use just my recent experiences, having a curated experience with clients or with prospects, having a presence on the floor, or even having us be on a stage. Those returns are more mixed. Now, I think having our people on a stage, I actually think that's a better value for the individual than it is for us as the firm, meaning that it's a really good rep to have, senior leaders go out and speak within that space. You can really amplify that through social afterwards. You can have launch. And so, but I don't know if you could actually tie like at least we haven't been yet in our infancy be able to tie dollars to that. But I think that I almost put that a bit on the side. That's really good. Just or helping accelerate the brand of our leaders. But so I would challenge, we're doing this now, is how do we continue to think about where we invest in trying to, steer away from significant investment on a floor. But that I would say that's a little bit of an antiquated way that, there's a bit of pay to play. It's almost like you notice who's not there more than you actually notice the people that are there. But even that statement there, I'm not certain I could quantify that really, but I think that's the perception that probably a lot of firms like in our space are playing, is that, we have to have someone there, even if it doesn't lead to anything.
Kevin, the thing that always goes through my head on these is, again, back to can you afford not to be there? I totally get what you're saying on the, quantifying value and, hey, did the deal come from being there or did the deal come from something else?
Yeah.
The thing that's hard for us to quantify, but I think is very real, is if we're not there, our competitors are there. If we're not, spending time with our clients, they are.
Yeah.
And so that at some degree there's the defensive play. And that's much harder to quantify because but anyways.
Well, but let's riff on that a little bit, because I think actually I would agree with that statement. So I can make a really strong argument for the EVP, for our employee value prop, to why we send people there. Again, it's an investment, it's training, there's a little bit of fun. That to me is, but that's not measured in sales. The return on these isn't measured in attention, knowledge, right? That's pretty simple. I can also very much estimate and attribute the client EVP. We're going to entertain, we're going to learn together, we're having a cure experience where if I can have a day with my clients at the event, that's a day that my competitors out there. Absolutely agree with that. I think the challenge, and this is where maybe my background coming from really client sales and delivery, really more client growth than pure sales, is I can't actually articulate the sales ROI.
Yeah.
Like that's the hardest one for me, is like new sales, new opportunities, even with existing clients, that somehow, man, we experienced something here that led to this whole new unlock. I think that's the part where it is. So I actually think being present, even like, do you actually even have to have a pass to get in anything? That's an interesting question. They're not cheap, so it's like, I'd rather spend, I'd rather have, a great steak dinner with my client for $4 versus having a pass. That's an ROI driven question that I ask our sales and our client teams to actually ask themselves. And, which I know some, the presenters of these conferences are not asking, not wanting to do that. There's also some positioning from, depending on the conference, if we're in that partner ecosystem, we get a lot of pressure from them to make sure that we're there too. And, so that's where it gets a little insidious to me. It's like, okay, so I have to show up at your event. I have to put so much money into it. And then I fit some type of tiering or status. That's just like, I'm like, well, then it's just a game. That feels gamesy to me versus, having a chance to be a client. But what I think it's interesting, now I'm going to channel my inner CFO hat. is it easier for us to get $1 million for a conference than it is for us to say, we're going to take that same $1 million and say, Jake, you can take client X to any experience. But I'm still not convinced. If I took my clients to, a World Cup game this summer, like if it's new, I don't know if that matters. I'm actually curious, like, what will that actually drive? Besides, I can absolutely calculate the EVP if I give World Cup tickets to our employees.
No, I mean, it's funny enough. This came up this week, so I don't know when this episode is going to be posted, but we had a conversation earlier this week with the marketing team around, the Masters is coming up. Obviously, everyone wants to go to the Masters. This is real discussion of like, hey, is that something that you build around? Now, I totally acknowledge that only works for a certain segment, but I mean, it's the same dynamic. Yeah. Can you do it? Yes. Is there a cost? Absolutely. Yeah. Is it worth it?
Yeah. And then for a firm where we're emerging and growing, I mean, again, that's a different budget than other firms that are kind of, they almost clients expect that. So it's actually really, so even, taking that one step further, like, do you say, it's earlier on, where do you spend that money? And I think that's the risk, going back to the original theme. Do you put your eggs in the big conference bucket because you're going to have heavy concentration? And that's probably why. I mean, again, you can have a client that can go multiple different teams, and so they're more likely to get them, or versus a more private event, to where maybe it's a little bit more intimate, and maybe it's just, even if it's 100% relationship driven, it's not, there's really not a selling element of that, which is really important, but it's just it's a fascinating element of like, how do you actually calculate the ROI on these different elements?
Well, and then you also have to look at it from the client perspective, right? Maybe the big conference is where they want to be. And so you want to shepherd that, you want to help support that and be there and do in that regard. Or maybe they want to go to the Masters, they want to go to the World Cup. It's kind of meeting them where they are too, right? There's an element of that you have to think about. There's all these decisions that when you're Kevin, as you're going through the list, it's like, there's all these different facets and angles you can take to it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like, what's going to be best for us and for them? Where do you find that happy medium?
Oh, for sure. And
the partners too, right?
Yeah. And then you add one more complexity to that. Yeah. So let's just make an easy split and say, for us, half our clients are CMOs, half our clients are CIOs or CTOs. Like, the CMOs of the enterprise companies where they're having to do this too. Like, they're literally going to the Masters and they're bringing their clients, so it's like, what point is it like, man, just almost event fatigue. And so I think that's where ultimately my ask to our client teams, my ask to my own clients is like, you have to know your clients well enough to know what they would resonate with them, right? And I think that's ultimately, that comes back to the real relationship around that. So that's what I think find useful, maybe not so much the big events, but like when you can have these intersections between multiple vendors where you have aligned interests to serve one client and you can come together and do that. I think that's pretty powerful because one, you're managing time well for that individual, because I mean, we were joking about it before we went on air today, just the amount of spam that we get from just different vendors always wanting something, expecting it. Everyone's getting just inundated with that. So
yeah. The reason we're talking about this topic today, right? We obviously there is a conference season, September through end of year, that happens. But really the other one that we're eyeing is this March through May time period where there's a lot of tech conferences spinning up and happening. And I think that was the genesis of getting into this, because I think, Jake, I know you've put in some time here to talk about, we've discussed last week in our QBR of like, okay, Q1's over. What are we seeing? What are the plays happening within the companies? And then kind of the next level of that is like, okay, we have some conferences coming up. What are the themes of these conferences? Like, do those align with what we're seeing in the market? And so I would love to toss it to you, Jake, for I know we waited a little bit to get to your list that you've worked really hard on.
No, it's fine. It's good
would love to talk about what you're seeing and what you're hearing as far as, what to expect from the research you've done.
Okay.
And see if it aligns.
I'm gonna read this for you guys, and then we'll get your reactions. But to tee this up again, I mean, all I did was look at, hey, for the conferences that are coming up, and I will acknowledge I looked primarily at the symposiums. So think like the Forrester Gartner. I looked at the big platform. So, Snowflake, Google Cloud, Adobe Summit, and then a couple that had just happened. So NVIDIA just happened, South by just happened, Shop Talk just happened. And all I did was look at the websites and try to find like, hey, if I look at the agenda for each of these conferences, what's on the agenda? Because what I wanted to see is, are we all talking about the same thing, or are there differences here? And my headline for you all is we're all talking about the same thing. There's no surprise here. So just prepare yourself accordingly. But here's
get my bingo card out.
Right. Yeah. Get your bingo card out. Here's my unscientific list of what's being talked about in the conferences. Thing one, agentic AI. obviously.
Shocking.
that off, yeah.
Shocking. Like,
That's
was
my
almost
free space,
I was going to say,
actually,
that's the free space. Literally every single conference website that I looked at, it's on the agenda.
But
No
you have
surprise.
to, right?
You have to.
You may not want to, but you have to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that's right
Yeah.
now. So then if you take that a step deeper, thing two, again, this is not a surprise. There in most of them was some notion of moving the AI conversation from, pilot to production. So some verbatims here. The Snowflake conference, they use the quote, "Momentum into measurable business results." Google Cloud Next had from experimentation to everyday operations. So lots of that. I think, again, not surprising.
And we've discussed that at length on the podcast, how
We have.
the pilot is over. People want use cases and people want actually MVPs that are providing value immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Three, don't worry, this is like getting progressively more interesting. Yeah. Three then is most of them, and these are acknowledging more of the tech ones, then got into this notion of data as a bottleneck. So we've gone from agentic AI to moving beyond experimentation to actual results to, all right, the big limiting factor here is the data. And we've talked about that too. We had Ellen on talking about that. Then the one maybe small surprise on the themes is most of the conferences, at least in the agendas, are bringing up some notion of the human backlash against AI. And I use that very loosely because it's termed differently. It's not as clear as everyone saying agentic AI, but you have things in the agendas around authenticity as a differentiator. You have things around, quote, building emotional connections, the unease of the algorithm age, things like that, I think, again, this is not wholly surprising, but it is curious, at least, that it's turning up. And then from there, then I think there's more variation. A lot of the conferences have notions around optimizing for the LLMs, see previous conversation with Aline, a lot of talk around what's now being termed unified commerce, which is the extension of the old omni-channel commerce, a lot of retail media, so kind of variation from there. But those are the things that jumped out that I thought were kind of fun.
So what I'm hearing, because we've covered all these at length on this podcast right here, is that we need a Pure Signal podcast conference, and we can just run back all the discussions that we've had.
No, Kevin would be so excited to be in this business model.
It's also very validating for, I think, all of us that like, hey, we're hitting the right topics.
Well, let's be honest. I did the research, so take that all with a grain of salt.
I'll take the wins where we can get them. And this is a win for me. But no, I mean, I think that if I were to actually have a bingo card in front of me without knowing the way you went about the research, and granted, you did it, but these are the things we care about. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably care about too. That I would have all of those, I think. I think that the unified, I haven't heard that as much as I feel like people are still using the omni-channel nomenclature. So this unified commerce, that cleans that up a little bit.
I've seen that more and more. And I mean, again, I'll acknowledge, and we can get smarter experts on here, but that to me is like, that's not a new trend. That is an extension of at least a 5-year-old trend.
Yeah.
It's just got a new twist in it with everything with AI.
I'm not surprised that those are the themes. I'd be curious to, and I don't know how you get this information, maybe unless you're Freeman or something like that, but like, I'd be curious to know the boost spend, like, not like so individual company, but like, how do you allocate, those, I had in a much previous life, I worked on some projects around that. Like we were really, how do you optimizing the actual show floor experience and how does that tie back into the content? I mean, it's actually a fascinating business model to understand what you're trying to do and how you measure success, but that's coming, but just even around those type elements of that, where are you using these events to be able to get splash? But ultimately, I'm going to come back to maybe my own bias for a second. I'm going to make it a generalization. These are exhausting events, because our roles, we're going as a learning, we're going to sell, we're going to engage, we're going to interact. I mean, like you come out of these things like literally, spent, and that's not even if you're not doing crazy things all night long. I mean, which is the whole other element of that experience, depending where it's at. But I just think it's not fun. I mean, that's where ultimately I'm like, I'm the old guy now talking. Maybe I say, oh my goodness, that's a lot of work. But I think I do actually think it's going to be interesting to see where it tweaks. Like I get like why 25,000 people or whatever showed up in NVIDIA last year for the first time. I didn't see the numbers from this year, because like that is an area where that's almost greenfield, right? I'm trying to figure out, how does a chip, really, a hardware company move into software solutioning? Where I look through that, it's the newest thing. I could see the models as they start to have theirs or certain elements, but like the more standard components, like how do they stay relevant in the midst of all that? One of the things I thought were interesting and intriguing for me personally is that I have found that this becomes a great place to recruit. Like you're actually able to connect.
Yeah, good one.
And you can actually, even ways that are pretty easy for you to recruit people that are maybe casually recruiting. And then I never fails that I run into someone from some of my walk of life, and sometimes very like randomly, like really good and like deep friendships that we had no idea that we were both, and we literally ran each other. And you're like, so that I've become smarter now on that and trying to like almost reserve a bit of time to be able to reconnect with folks that you wouldn't normally do on a random, Tuesday in Vegas or something. But like, and so that's an element too, that is like, how do you make a little bit of lemonade out of what I think is a pretty exhausting experience for many people.
I kind of have a follow up on that. So you talked kind of a lot about the, looking at the agendas, right? We talk about like kind of your pre-conference planning and approach and figuring out, who goes, why are they going? What's the value out of that? We hit that a little bit, but I think the exhaustion point is a good one that you made, Kevin, because you come out of it exhausted, but I would say there's probably an element too of like, there's some energizing impact there as well of like, maybe like physically you're exhausted, but when you pick things back up after you've had a couple of nights rest, there's an energizing factor of like, I had a lot of really good conversations. I learned a lot of really good things. I met with some really good people. How does that carry into, we go back to this, and I don't know about you all, and I mentioned this when we did our Women in Tech podcast, but like coming out of events, I feel super energized, but then I get back to my daily routine and my normal everyday, it's like compared to going on like a vacation where you get really good rest and you're happy and you're eating well and everything's going well. And you're like, oh, I want to take this and plug it into my real life so I can feel this way every day. How do you approach that from a conference standpoint of like, you've learned all this great stuff, you're exhausted, but how do you carry that momentum forward? Or how do you encourage people to do that?
Well, I'll take a first pass on that one. One of the things that we've learned as a company, and I would almost say this is if you forget everything else, you're sending people to conferences, you're making the investment, don't miss this, is I would go a step upstream from what you're describing. Set the expectations of the attendees before the event. What I mean by that is this is something that we have, as we're trying to be good stewards of our own spend as a company, started to do when, hey, if we greenlight someone to go to a conference for any of those reasons that you mentioned, for learning, for client relationship, whatever, there is a very clear expectation of them that, they get when we greenlight it, that has, this is what we're expecting of you to come back with. And it's different person to person. Like if we're going to an event for lead generation, that expectation might be, hey, I expect you to come back with 3 leads or whatever the number is. If we're sending them for learning, that might be, hey, we expect you to go run a meeting when you get back and you're going to train the rest of the crew that didn't go to this thing. The reason that I say that, Ryan, is in answer to your question is, in our experience, that has been the thing that keeps people from just getting back in the rhythm of the day job and forgetting the goodness that happened, because there's a very clear, like, oh no, I've got this expectation on me that, it makes a connection.
I'm going to try and do something really difficult here and take everything we've talked about so far and summarize it into one question you should ask yourself. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're a business leader, if you're a part of this type of track where you're dealing with the complex nature of these landscape of conferences.
Be curious and bold.
Yeah.
No.
And it's we're not there yet. We're close. Shoot. No, we're close. We're close. Don't jump the gun. In my mind, the only thing that comes to mind is, what is your why? Short and sweet. Ask yourself, the kind of the starting question is, what's the value, right? We've talked about multiple facets of different angles of value that you can find within these conference, but based on your business, based on your clients, based on your people, you have to kind of tailor the conference to your why, and don't let what's going on in the conference dictate what you're trying to do, right? It's kind of like you go in thinking about what's your value first versus the value that's being given at the conference, and then you can kind of work your way back into tailoring that value into what your value is. Yeah.
Well, and I think what's interesting around what's your why, I mean, I'll make this, again, in my day job, my why's changed. So you weren't asking specifically about, just giving my own bias. Like, so I'm an operationally driven, client growth related CEO. Like that's been my path, right? Client service, client growth. I'm not the typical splash. So like for me, my why is how are we expanding our account? What are we doing through this? How do we love in our client? I mean, it's very much around growth themes. Well, then I talked to our chief revenue officer and it's very much around sales.
Right.
So I mean, even and they give CEOs, that come up through that side of the organization, and it's more around splash or around new product. I mean, your world might be more on new product development or launch, right? So I think that even like that's a really interesting question, Ryan. But all of us have our own bias behind that why. And now the good news is you can find that in most of these experiences where you can tailor that. So one of the things I've had to do, and even like in stewarding our dollars, but also protect some of our teams from some of the other folks who are also trying to do their roles, is that it's a bit squishy. Like, I mean, and this is never going to be, I mean, any type of ROI experience, whether it be in a marketing event or in a project, right? It's not as easy as you wish it to be. And you're going to have to try different things. But, it's actually, I like your frame. But not only is it think of a company, but the participant, how you think about what you're trying to get out of it.
Well,
Please go ahead.
No, I was going to say, to your point of, there's different whys within an organization, right? That's where you can really then take a look at the conference landscape and start going through them and saying, our why fits better here, so we're going to send this group here. Your why fits better here. Maybe we send this group here. So I think that's part of it too, of like, there is the opportunity now with all these conferences that you can kind of tailor them specifically to, within the C-suite's whys and make sure that everybody's feeling like they're being heard and seen with what they're trying to accomplish.
Well, it's also understanding the vendor landscape too. So there may be some conferences where you're just going to have a better opportunity to showcase your services, and either be in a prominence level or just even in a way that's more personal. Whereas some of these larger ones, like you're just in the sea, like you are one of 3,000 consulting companies that are here. I mean, it's like, okay, like we don't have the same budget as some of our peers and competitive set. So it's like, I think that, well, what does that look like too? So I think that's part of the game, but actually I think that's kind of fun to think about. What's the positioning and where do you think you're going to have the biggest impact, and where can you actually have the chance to kind of ultimately drive the outcomes you're looking for.
Awesome. Jake, final thoughts from you? I think we've covered. I've got my list. I got my check marks.
That was really well said. My answer to your question, I was going to propose 2 questions that you can ask yourself, because I can't get it down to one. But my cheat on, if you're at the selection level of, hey, which of these menu of conferences should we be at? If I need a cheat, I look for, are your peers there? And the reason I say that is a little bit of, let's use the wisdom of the crowd on these. Not to say you should follow the pack and you should ignore the why and all of that, but if it's hey, I've got this 5 options. I mean, if I know that, I'll pick on myself. Hey, a lot of the, chief innovation officers or heads of product, whatever term you want to use, are going to this one. That tells me that, okay, there's something here that might suggest I want to be there if I'm looking to drive relationships and networks, et cetera. And then I do firmly believe, once I'm beyond the selection criteria and I'm like, okay, we're going to this or we're sending people to this. My next question then is, what is the expectation that we're setting for the people that are going? I still come back to that as keep you on the path you want to be on, which, to be fair, is just another framing of your what's the why.
Right. And probably some resetting of those expectations throughout the conference as the chaos ensues and the busyness happens and the nighttime fun. Just, hey, reminder everybody, this is why we're here.
Well, that's why I think that the EVP side of it is actually very important. I mean, it's a great opportunity for you to kind of give your team a chance to reward. One more build for me, Jake, as I was listening to you and around who's there. It's my other add to that would be and how are they showing up? So where are they investing? I mean, everything is for sale. Sponsorship, square footage, suites, restaurants, like everything is for sale. And so where do you think you have that biggest bang for the buck? Where are you drawing in, even like the idea of like, hey, we rented out a restaurant, we invite 300 of our clients to come, versus I'm curating a dinner with one client and I'm bringing my CEO or I'm bringing this, or like, that's the part that's fascinating to me, is like, also like, where do you, would it be my role or, other people that you're trying to really say that real estate, like the actual fact that, a CEO of a Fortune 50 will give you a dinner, like that time actually may be a bigger signal and value than anything you spent in that dinner, right? So to speak. And I think that that's an interesting element too, of how you think about it from just access. What is that worth? So
awesome. Any other final thoughts?
Fun topic and expensive topic. And so I think it's really, which really goes back to measurement and outcomes. And so, which I love about all this stuff is really what you're asking and just continuing to challenge as we're going down, again, we go back to all these conference themes. I think what you're continuing to see, what is you really, it doesn't, the general splash, so to appeal of investment marketing, what you want to call it, how do you have that versus a more focused results? And, we're going to continue to argue, I think here that focused results and outcomes is really where you should invest your time and money.
Awesome. Very well said. Well, I hope you learned a lot. I know I did. It's been another great episode of the Pure Signal podcast for myself, Ryan, for Kevin, for Jake, always reminding you to be bold and let's go, Kevin.
Curious.
Be
curious.
Right. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.